Hello friends, and I welcome all of you again to this course titled as British Poetry. Friends, we ended the last class with a very popular, very interesting poem based on a mythological character Ulysses. And from Victorian literature, today we are moving towards modern literature. Modern literature started from 1901. We generally say that the time period of Victorian literature is from 1830 to 1900. Some people say that the Victorian literature time period is 1831 to 1905. But basically, this writer, T.S. Eliot, has published his major works, most popular works, between 1910 to 1930. And this poem, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which we are going to discuss in today's 30 minutes lecture, is one of the examples of modern literature. Friends, this time T.S. Eliot had seen First World War. And before First World War, the condition was very critical. As you can imagine, that war never happens suddenly. There are circumstances. One after the other incidents happen, and these incidents create a very, let's say, critical kind of situation. There are disputes started between two countries, or then three countries involved into it, then four countries. Then there is, let's say, problem of poverty or unemployment or exploitation, etc. in the, let's say, underdeveloped countries. And friends, when all these factors clubbed together, they lead to a situation of a world war. I am not going into those situations because here we are not to discuss history, but we are here to discuss poetry. But a background was essential for you so that you can understand the major factors of the modern poetry. And that will be the topic for today. The topic which we are going to discuss today is modernism and different tenets of poetry. So, tenets means characteristics. What are the characteristics of modern poetry? How are we going to, let's say, discuss it? How are we going to analyze it? And how are we going to consider the writings or the poems of T.S. Eliot as a modern poetry? Okay? So, we are going to discuss about all those things in today's class. But before that, the lecture outcome. What will be the outcome? What are you going to learn from this lecture? You would be in a position to justify different tenets of select poetry. Select poetry is Prufrock. And establish T.S. Eliot as a modern poet. This is another thing which you are going to justify. If you involve into discussion with some, let's say, literary figure, some student of literature, and the student or the person asks you that why T.S. Eliot is considered as a modern poet, the answer is not that T.S. Eliot was born in the time of modern movement, that T.S. Eliot wrote his works in the time of, let's say, modernism. But you must have some justifications that can make you understand and that can make the readers understand that how, let's say, this kind of poetry is considered as modern poetry. So you would be able to get a holistic picture towards the poetry writing skills of T.S. Eliot. So, without wasting much time, let us try to understand the modernism which is visible in the poetry of T.S. Eliot. Modernism is a movement in literature that lasted from roughly the end of the 19th century to the middle of the 20th century. We generally call it, let's say, started at the end of the 19th century, let's say 1890 or 95, and it continued till the middle of the 20th century, it means till 1950. The era marked landmark progress in science and technology, industrialization and globalization. Friends, all of you know that when science and technology starts, let's say, moving, the pace continuously increases. Then nobody knows that we are going to reach to what end. The same situation was there in this century, in this modernist time. The science and technology was, let's say, its speed was kept on increasing. Day after day, the new explorations were done. Day after day, the new things were invented by the scientists. And the industrialists were, let's say, taking advantage and were making this world as a globalized world with the help of these scientific experiments. As all of you know that the scientists, they are always interested in, let's say, selling their inventions, and who other than these merchants or industrialists are going to purchase their, let's say, products. Although these all indicatives of modernism and the modernist writers, however, diverted their interest into otherwise. So, when we talk about these writers of modernism, the modern age or the modern writers, we see that these people are diverted towards, let's say, something else, something otherwise than industrialization and globalization. The prime objective was to highlight the potential incongruities underneath the surface advancement. And what is that? To which, let's say, these modern writers were attracted? It was the after effects or the problems which are created for human beings, their mind and the society, because of this immense scientific development, industrialization, use of excessive technology and the globalized world. They observed that with the increased reliance on science and technology, the gradual removal of the individual from rural community into urban isolation, the individual and society were at odds with one another. Friends, it was the concern of, let's say, these modern writers, and they had observed it and they wrote about it in detail, that there is an increased reliance. Reliance means dependency. There is a dependency on science and technology of the common people. And the gradual removal of the individual from rural community into urban isolation is again one of the major concerns of these modern people. They thought that the villages are ruined now, the countryside, the rural community, it is completely, let's say, shattered, and the people are now migrating from the rural life to the urban life. And urban life is full of isolation. There is alienation, rootlessness, etc., which is created with these people when they move to the cities. The individual and society were at odds with one another, and which is why, friends, there is a turmoil started happening between the individual and the society. Why? Because the village people were habituated of living in a different kind of society. They were following a different kind of culture. Their lifestyle was different. But when these people migrate to the city life, their, let's say, their life completely changes. And this can create, let's say, a conflict between the urban people and the rural people who have recently migrated to urban area. So this conflict has raised a kind of restlessness, a kind of depression in the mind of the human beings who are living in the cities. And this is, let's say, one of the major themes of writing into modernist poetry. Moreover, they also witnessed that the devastation caused by the World War I left the civilization declined rather than improved. So, when these modern writers saw World War between 1914 to 18, they witnessed the after effects of the World War and the, let's say, pre-effects of the World War I. And they came to a conclusion that the impact was devastating on all the countries of the world, whether they participated in the World War I or not. And the civilization declined, let's say, rather than improved. The civilization or the people, their lives were declined. Their thought process completely changed, their personality changed, their, let's say, lifestyle changed, everything changed because of this World War. T.S. Eliot is one of pioneering literary figures of the modernist movement. In his works, he opted to infuse the trending issues of his time. Friends, when we, let's say, see T.S. Eliot's poetry, we see that he was a kind of literary figure who gave name to modernist movement. He was one of the major figures. And if we look at his works, he opted to infuse the trending issues of his time. He was a, let's say, contemporary writer of his age, talking only about his society, what he sees in the society. Like Alfred Lord Tennyson, he did not go into the, let's say, past figures like Ulysses, etc. Although he wrote on allusions, but those allusions are signifying the dreadful situation of his contemporary society. Eliot's earliest tour de force, or the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, indicates a groundbreaking literary shift from late 19th century romantic poetry to modernism. Friends, when we look at this poem Prufrock, we see that it is a groundbreaking work, a benchmark into modern literature. And it is suggesting a shift from the 19th century, let's say, Victorian life or the romantic poetry towards the modernism. Modernism, friends, is brutal. Modernism is real. Modernism is the cruel humanity. It is talking about the cruel face of the society. And in this way, Eliot wants the readers to come out of the idealism which Victorian or the romantic literature has created into literature. He wants to show the society the face, the real face. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock encapsulates nearly all the major tenets of the subject movement, and we are going to look at them one by one now. Friends, first let me tell you the title is very interesting. When you read the title, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, you might think that the poem is about some kind of beauty, love, happiness, joy, satisfaction, or let's say rejuvenation, energy. But on the other hand, you will see that there is nothing like love which is visible in the life of Prufrock. So this person, J. Alfred Prufrock, is a person who had lived their life. He has nothing to see now. He is completely, let's say, fed off or depressed, or he has reached to a saturation in his life, and thus he is sharing his experiences with the reader through his speech, suggesting that there is nothing left in his life, and thus even if the life ends, he do not feel any, let's say, grief or sadness on that. Let us now talk about the major tenets of the movement one by one in this, let's say, PPT. The first point is free verse. This poem or most of the modernist poetry, they are written in the free verse. So what is this free verse and how modernists have used it? The modernists significantly deviated from the strict meter formulated by the romantic school of poetry. They preferred free verse, which follows neither rhyme scheme nor a consistent meter. Friends, when the modernists started writing, they saw that life has nothing like smooth or organized. So why to make our literature or poetry smooth or very organized? They left talking about rhyme scheme, iambic pentameter, 10 let's say syllables, unstressed, stressed, and all these nonsensical things. They left consistency of meter also. Without any rhyme scheme, they said that the life is full of complexities and brutalities, so let us make our language also that kind of complex, and that complexity cannot be achieved with this rhymed verse. To be relevant to the era, the love songs of J. Alfred Prufrock is also composed in free verse. However, the poem does not fully follow the free verse, rather it adheres to some formal rhymes as well. Friends, there are, let's say, formal rhymes used in the poem, but those formal rhymes are adhering to the allusions or the past literature references which poet has used in the poem. Where he talks about his original expression, his own ideas, he follows the free verse in the poem. The next characteristic of modernist poetry, which is visible in this poem, is the stream of consciousness technique. Although it was made famous into literature by Virginia Woolf and few other writers before Virginia Woolf as well, but this was, let's say, adapted by T.S. Eliot, and he used a lot it into this poem, Prufrock. Stream of consciousness is a popular mode of narration in the modern era. The modernist writers often used this technique to perplex the audience by leaving things vague and unexplained. Friends, what is a stream of consciousness? It is the real depiction of life. In life also, we leave sometimes things vaguely. We leave sometimes some things unexplained. We do not need explanation of everything. In the same way, the stream of consciousness also talks about the unfulfillment, unfulfilled desires, vagueness, and unexplained things in a person's life. So we can simply say that stream of consciousness makes poetry more realistic. That is why works narrated by this technique are often difficult to follow. So why? Because friends, when we are using a stream of consciousness, the literary work is written into fragments. Life is all about pieces. Take for example, you are in the present time, working on your laptop, thinking about something present. Suddenly you goes into your past life, 15 years back, and start thinking about it. So life is not about living always in the present. Sometimes you are in your past, sometimes you are in your future, sometimes you are in your present. So your life is a defragmented activity. It is not organized, it is not, let's say, unified, but it is fragmented into pieces. The love song of J. Alfred Prufrock also employs the stream of consciousness technique to present the inner thoughts or anguish of a neurotic, isolated, hesitant, and cynical man named Prufrock. Friends, when we look at this poem is talking about the character portrait of Prufrock and a useless life of this person. We see that the inner thoughts and anguish of this person, we can consider this character Prufrock as a neurotic guy. He is isolated. There is nobody with him with whom he can share his feelings. He is hesitant. He do not want to mix up with the people. He is alone in his life. He has no one with whom he can share his feelings. So he can be considered as a cynical kind of person, a half-mad kind of person. The aforesaid subject clearly releases his indecisive thoughts in the following lines. And then I am quoting few lines from the poem which will make you understand that his mind, Prufrock's mind, is full of indecisive thoughts. Thoughts thinking about this time, that time, different things are discussed into, let's say, this poem about Prufrock's life, which are talking about the meaninglessness of his life. So let us now read this long speech by Prufrock talking about his own life, and I quote now these lines from the poem. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Prufrock is very underconfident now. He can't dare to do something new. So he is asking from himself that at the present moment, will he dare to do something? Time to turn back and descend the stair with the bald spot on the middle of my hair. Prufrock is an old person now. There is an bald spot in the middle of his head. It means that his hair are gone from one spot of his, let's say, skull. And he is, let's say, trying to turn the time back. He want to, let's say, descend the stairs, but he is not able to do that. They will say how his hair is growing thin. And people who will look at, let's say, Prufrock, they might say that why his hair are growing thin in the present, let's say, time. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin. Prufrock is talking about his, let's say, weakness of his body or the changing in his body. He is saying that when he wears his morning coat, the collar is, let's say, mounting firmly to the chin. Mounting firmly to the chin means the length of his neck has decreased and the collar is touching the chin of the character, suggesting that his body is, let's say, coming down. The necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. So he says that now he attached the necktie with a pin. Why? Because it is considered as rich and modest, but his body is now very, let's say, weak. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. And then people will look at, let's say, this person, and they will say that the arms and legs of this person are thin now. Prufrock is weak now. Do I dare disturb the universe? Then Prufrock asks to himself that will he dare to disturb the universe? Disturb the universe means can he do something that can change the world? Can he do something so that people are attracted towards him? People can think about him. People can appreciate him, but there is nothing left in his life. In a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. And as soon as this person, Prufrock, decides that he is now going to do something daring, something new, in a minute the decision changes. The decision, let's say, reverses. So now there is nothing new in Prufrock's lives and he cannot dare to, let's say, take any step which is, let's say, adventurous. The next characteristic of modern poetry which is visible through the life of Prufrock is alienation. He is an alienated person. There is no one in his life now. Alienation is one of the central themes in the modern era. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock also hinges around his themes. So this is one of the major themes. Prufrock is alienated in his life. The poet explores alienation through the title character Prufrock, who is paralyzed by indecision and worry about his appearances to others, particularly to women. Friends, this poem is symbolic to the paralysis which happens in the old age. I am not talking about the literally paralysis, but paralysis means you are unable to do anything new in your life. This is happening with almost all the old people. They are paralyzed. They are, let's say, indecision. Indecision means they do not want to take any decision in their life. They hate new things in their life. They worry about everything. And in the same way, Prufrock is worried about his appearance, how he looks in front of women, how women were, let's say, mock at him that he is now an old person. His inability to properly express his love and fears with rejection supersede his natural desire to be with women. So when we look at Prufrock, we see that his sexual senses are very weak now. He cannot do sex with any women, but he wants to do that. But his body do not allow him to do that in the weakness and the old age. So he is unable to properly express his love and fear of rejection. He thinks that if he propose to any woman for making a relationship, she will refuse looking at his position. So in the, let's say, in this condition of rejection, he will be, let's say, suppressed. So his natural desire with the women is suppressed with this idea, which in turn created an awkward and isolated character that is aloof from society, which is why Prufrock is a person who is now isolated from the society. He is in an awkward position. He is alone. He cannot, let's say, enjoy life. Prufrock believes that his paralysis has stemmed from the silent criticism of those around him, and thus he thinks that he will be free of his paralyzing fear once he isolates himself from others. Friends, this person, Prufrock, is a very demotivating condition. He believes that there is a paralysis in his thoughts. The silent criticism which he himself is doing for his own condition has made him to think that he will be free of his paralyzing fear once he isolate himself from others. Which is why Prufrock do not want to meet anyone. He want to live alone, because he thinks that if he meet other people, they will mock at him. This idea is further reinforced by his wandering at dusk through the narrow back alley of the cedar side of the city, where the only being are the common class people. So what is the, let's say, Prufrock has decided for his life? The, let's say, this idea is further reinforced by his wandering at dusk. Prufrock wanders in the dusk time. Dusk is the time when nobody will look at him. Through the narrow back alleys, the places which are isolated, the cedar side of the city. Cedar side means isolated areas, very less crowded areas. He travel at those places, where the only being are the common class people. The common class people are there, who the high class people are not there, who are elite and who can, let's say, appreciate Prufrock, looking at his appearance. Since here he is isolated from the people he knows, he finds the most comfort in the company of the, let's say, complete strangers. So Prufrock do not want to go in the company of the, let's say, known people. Rather, he wished to live in the company of the strangers, common strangers, who don't know him. He is comfortable into their company because he thinks that they are not going to pass any comment on Prufrock. And it is, let's say, proved in this line, which I quote now from the poem. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves, leaning out of windows. So he says that in the way he meets many, let's say, uncommon people, many strangers who had no concern with Prufrock, and which is why Prufrock is comfortable into their company. The next element of modernist tenet of poetry, which is visible in this poem Prufrock, is urban setting. Prufrock talks about the urban setting, how, let's say, urban society is created. The modernists significantly deviated from the romantics in the matter of choosing the setting. So modernists prefer talking about the urban setting, romantics preferred talking about the rural setting. Whereas the former used the rural setting to explore nature from the emotional and imaginary point of view, the latter employed an urban setting to portray the city life realistically with its hustle and bustle. So, the modernist poets chose the city life. It is crowded, it is full of chaos, disturbance, dissatisfaction, industrialization, modern growth, isolation, and the modernists preferred these things for their poetry. Eliot also followed his contemporaries and confined the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock within an urban setting, which is evident in the following lines. And we see that we are going to analyze what kind of setting T.S. Eliot has produced in this poem, and it talks about completely urban life, fully developed and full of industries, fog, pollution, etc. Let us try to understand that urban setting with the help of these lines from the poem. And now I quote the lines. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. He says the yellow fog. This yellow fog is created because of dust and pollution of industries. It is rubbing its back upon the window panes. It means windows are, let's say, very ugly now. Their mirrors are ugly. They cannot, the glass cannot see through. The yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes. And then we have a yellow smoke which is rubbing its muzzle on the window panes. So there is smoke, there is fog, nobody can see other person, there is too much pollution in the city. Licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. And this, let's say, dust, it has licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. At every corner in the evening it spreads in the city. Lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. And this, let's say, this pollution, it is lingering everywhere. It is lingering upon the pools where people used to swim, and it stand in drains. At every, let's say, at every place it is spreaded. Let's fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. And over that, let's say, yellow smoke, there is a soot. Soot means a polluted air which comes out from the chimneys of the factories, and it spreads over it. Slipped by the terrace, made the sudden leap. And then from the terrace, this smog, it slips down, and a sudden leap is made by this smog into the rooms of the house. And seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And in that, let's say, soft October night, which used to be in the earlier times but not in the present time, this kind of, let's say, dust and air, it curled once about the house. Inside the house it comes, and then people fell asleep, consuming that kind of polluted air into their life. So basically in these lines, T.S. Eliot is saying that the complete London or the complete Britain is under the influence of this development, and people have to pay for this development. Their life has become completely away from the nature. So I hope that you have now understood the modernist tenets in this poetry, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.